and welcome to Telewizja Republika. The breaking news from the Russian war against Ukraine today was the biggest prisoners of war swap in the history of this conflict. According to several sources, Reuters is one of them, and that's a quote, Russia's Defense Ministry said that 248 military personnel had been handed over by Ukraine. Kyiv said it had brought home 230 people, 224 soldiers and 6 civilians, in what is said was the largest documented swap of troops so far, end quote. This prisoner exchange is the best proof that this war is nowhere near the end, as we read in the latest British intelligence daily updates that are posted online by Defense Headquarters Twitter account. The Russian activity in Ukraine is concentrated right now on executing long-range missile hits against Ukrainian infrastructure. This is what Chuck Farrer said yesterday on our program about the effectiveness of those attacks.
It didn't really work out the way that he wanted. Only 30% of his missiles came through to the target. 70% were shot down. And here's a really interesting statistic. 100% of his Shahed drones were eliminated. You go to the top of the Russian food chain, his hypersonic Kinzhal missile, 100% of those were shot down. So it must have been a very frustrating weekend for Mr. Putin, although it was a tragic one for Ukraine.
The same goes with swarm attacks of Shahed suicide drones that are also being shot down at the significant rate of 100%. All of them are being shot down by the Ukrainian defense. However, even shooting down 100% of Kinzhals and 100% of Shaheds does not make the Ukrainian air defense unbeatable.
Although Ukraine had a 70% intercept rate over the January 2nd attack, what is so terrible about that? 70% is a pretty good interception rate. But the problem is that Putin is literally shooting at high-rise apartment buildings, civilian population centers. So even if 30%, a paltry number of the missiles get through, they're still killing Ukrainian civilians. And more than 150 people were killed or injured in these attacks. And again, it's hard for a rational, good Western person to even understand that Putin is deliberately aiming at civilians.
When we refer to above-mentioned British intelligence reports, we read that those huge attacks are an effect of long-standing preparations of Russian Air Force. British military intelligence claims that as significant proportion of the stock of air-launched cruise missiles and ballistic missiles were used in those attacks, most of them were produced in the time when Russia did not attack Ukrainian infrastructure. You probably remember that our friend Joe Lindsay was speaking about it over and over again for months, that the Russian missile inactivity in the second half of 2023 means that something big is about to come. According to the British intelligence analyst, the recent Russian strikes were concentrated on Ukraine's defense industry, what makes it obvious that Russia wants to do everything it can to diminish the Ukrainian defense capabilities ahead of springtime, when the frontline activity will surely come back. What is also interesting is that according to British defense intelligence community, Russia decided to hit military defense industries rather than Ukraine's energy infrastructure. And their conclusion, the Brits' conclusion, is that hitting the defense industry, and that's a quote, almost certainly shows that Russia is recognizing the growing importance of defense industrial capabilities and capacity as Russia is preparing for a long war. And that, in a way, could be optimistic, because on one hand, it shows that Russia is unable to hit any kind of blitzkrieg against Ukraine, but is pessimistic on the other hand, because it shows that Ukraine is going to be involved in the long war of attrition, and Ukrainian demographic potential is 3 times smaller than Russian. And that makes it obvious that this war could be won by Ukraine only if the West delivers firepower, weapons, and technology. And if we can say something optimistic, at least for now, is that according to several sources, first F-16 pilots were trained by the NATO states, and that gives us hope that one day they will have a jet fighter or two to jump in to shoot down some Ruskies, because we really love watching it. You can join us on rackrakon.com, that's our website. You can leave us your email as we are following the ongoing war against the West. And that's what we are going to talk about on my show. My name is Michał Rachoń. This is Rackrakon. And we roll in. And here to talk with us about not only the aviation aspect of the war is Colonel Jeff Fischer. Great to see you again. 30 years of military experience, of intelligence experience, and Air Force experience. Great to see you again. Well, actually, for the first time in the new edition of Rackrakon, we're rolling in a new place, in a new station. Great to have you again on our program.
Glad to be back, and I'm glad to see you back on your feet, buddy. The world needs your voice.
Jeff, thanks for those nice words. As you are a warrior on the information war against the Russia, giving us knowledge about what is going on in this unprecedented war of Russia against Ukraine, it's great to have you again and have a chance to talk to you. Jeff, what do you make of those latest announcements of the British military intelligence that Russia is targeting the military industry of Ukraine? It doesn't seem to me a kind of a new thing. It seems to me that during a war, states attack their military industries. Why, in your opinion, military intelligence of Great Britain decided to point exactly this aspect of their latest attacks?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a little obvious that that's what you intend to do as a military. You know, some of the most famous military strategists in the world would say that wars are fought on really a logistics front, right? They're not really fought on a battlefront. So if you can win the logistics war and the war of the will, right, the will of the people. Those are two of the most prominent factors. So I mean, I understand. I don't disagree with the UK, but I think it's somewhat obvious that that's what Russia is doing. I will say that it's interesting that that there's less. I won't say none, but there's less of the discussion about Russia targeting the Ukrainian populace. Right? If you look back at the beginning of this war, we saw numerous examples where either Russia had really stupid weaponry that was failing and not hitting its target and hitting civilian entities and apartment complexes, or they knew exactly what they're doing. I kind of lean to the latter there, and we don't see that as much anymore, and perhaps that's a good thing.
Jeff, the interesting thing here is we talked yesterday to Chuck Fowler. You know Chuck and his expertise, and he pointed to the thing that you just mentioned, that this largest in terms of scale attack of Russia against Ukraine for months brought significant amount of victims and of civilian casualties. So What is the reason for this? Because on one hand, Russia is trying to attack military base, or actually the military defense, as military industry, sorry. And on the other hand, we got a significant amount of people who are harmed, civilians who are just living in the households and the places where they just spending their time. Is there a kind of a change in the strategy, or are those two strategies parallel, or maybe they are just targeting the military targets but hitting the civilians by accident?
Yeah, I think time's going to tell. I don't know if we have an answer to that one right now, right? I do know that there's a shift. I would also say that, the recent Russia attack, the New Year's Day-ish attack, this is the largest one, that we've really seen. And that bodes a couple questions, right? Is the Russian military industry able to actually start producing long-range missiles and more of these hypersonic, munitions? Or was this a huge feint by Russia where they kind of just depleted out their inventory and are now kind of, hoping for something else? I don't know. I think if you're in Russia's camp, you probably lean towards the former. And if you're not in Russia's camp, you lean towards the latter. I do know that there's been video, and it's not this. This was put out by Jay Smart of the Kiev Post recently, where he talked about a lot of air defense assets kind of being pulled away from Ukraine and pulled back into Russia. That would make sense, I think, if Russia is anticipating a counterstrike, right? If you're Russia and you're expecting Ukraine to come back with some big air assault, we know that they've reached Moscow in the past, right? We know that. We know they can hit Belgorod. So that pulling back of the air defenses to prepare for a counterattack into logistics hubs or these strategic cities would make sense. So it's interesting to see some of the games that are being played on the battlefront.
Jeff, it is very interesting also because we talked to several people who are located in Kyiv, in Lviv, in Kharkiv, in our program for last month, and one of them, our friend Joe Lindsay, each time he connected with us on each Monday, he said for like last 4 or 5 months, he said that there was no significant missile attack on Ukraine since the Blackfeet headquarters was hit by Ukraine. Now, what we read in the British intelligence report, we have an information that this New Year's Eve attack was in a way using of the weapons that were produced for those months. Does it mean that Russia just used everything they had in their disposal until, I don't know, since the date was, I think, in the middle of 2023, and they didn't have anything to throw at the battlefield?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I don't think Russia's going to share with us what their munitions statuses are. I would greatly appreciate it, but I think it would be fair to say that the munitions that are made over the past few months are part of the munitions that were released recently. And I think, Russia's openly stated they're trying to ramp up production of some of these things. The other thing that I will point out that's actually very interesting, one of the Kitzel missiles, one of these hypersonic missiles, if you will, right? There's been imagery, a video of it captured actually coming down and striking. If you slow down the imagery, you can actually go to frames per second, and from frames per second, you can do some kind of rough measurement of the missile against itself to figure out how fast the missile is traveling. And I'm not saying that the math is correct, because there are some fuzzy parameters, but the fastest that the person who's done the math on it can get it to is about 1.1 Mach, which for a hypersonic missile, that's really, really slow, right? Yeah. So in its terminal phase, at least this missile was only doing 1.1 Mach. Again, there could be a lot of reasons for that, and I'm not going to speculate, as to that this is the standard. The missile could have been doing maneuvers in an end state to try and defeat, being shot out of the sky, which would bleed speed and bleed a lot of the ability to maintain knots on its nose. But I would also say, at Mach 3 or Mach 4, your ability to maneuver and pull Gs is significantly limited. So there's a lot of, I believe there's probably a lot of people in Washington, D.C. and in Fort Meade, Maryland, where the NSA is located, and doing a lot of analysis on that imagery.
But this is very interesting. Again, Chuck Ferrer yesterday shared the same doubts about the real effectiveness of Kinjal missiles, and he actually stated that this is something what Russia calls as hypersonic missile, and the effectiveness of this latest attack in terms of what the Ukrainian anti-aircraft defense did makes those missiles more like pretend to be hypersonic than be hypersonic for real. Is there something like this coming through the minds of military experts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to geek out too much with your audience, but I would say that it's not hard to make an asset fly at hypersonic speed, right? If you want basically, excuse me, a hypersonic projectile, that's relatively easy to do. And I would tell you that, you know, when God forbid a nuclear war ever happens, when nukes come back into reentry, they're all flying relatively at hypersonic speeds. They're just, you know, they're not missiles. They're just basically on a trajectory like artillery. The problem with a hypersonic missile, right, the physics issue is trying to get it to turn. Because it's going so fast, anytime you move that nose even 1 degree, 2 degrees in azimuth or elevation, you expose part of the skin of the side of the missile and it starts to tumble because it's just not structurally capable of maintaining form in the turn, or it starts to heat rapidly because when you expose that side skin, the side of the airframe or the missile, right, it's going to heat up rapidly. So these become massive problems when you're talking about hypersonic missiles and being able to turn and maneuver and things like that. And we'll leave it at that so that your audience doesn't fall asleep. Yeah.
We've been following the news from this war for a very long time, and we haven't heard this piece of technical information that gives you the perspective of the challenges that the constructors have to face when thinking about the long-range war. But there is another thing I wanted to have your opinion about, and this is not a news from last 48 hours, but last week we reported, Telewizja Republika reported about this fact for the first, we were the ones who broke the news about the Russian missile entering Polish airspace and coming back to Ukraine, and that happened during this New Year attack. I wonder, what is your assessment of the meaning of this kind of, I don't know, event, incident, whatever you call it? Is it, in your opinion, a deliberate act? Did someone program the route that the missile was traveling? Or can it be an accident? What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's hard to have an accident like that, right? It's also not, it's not, what would I say, uncommon for Russia to do these things. I think if we look back just a handful of years in the past, right, we have an example where Russia was violating airspace in Syria, and they were violating Turkey's airspace. And at the time, President Erdogan said, if you violate my airspace one more time, I'm going to shoot your airplane down. And he did, right? So Turkey actually, held Russia's feet to the fire and said, quit violating my airspace, because they were doing it. And I, as I understand, to date, Russia hasn't violated, Turkey's airspace again. So they learned their lesson. It would be interesting if the Polish leadership would maybe take some lessons from President Erdogan there.
We know that the AWACS aircraft are patrolling the NATO eastern flank, and we know from the official statements that this missile that entered Polish airspace was surveilled in a way, was observed by the military. What is the distance that NATO countries and the devices that you were part of a crew for a long time can watch this kind of thing? How far is the rough distance that we can monitor what is going on in the airspace?
So, Rock, I love coming on your show, and I want to keep doing it, and I don't want to go to jail, so I'm not allowed to answer that question.
Okay, but is it fair for me to say that, and will I be close to truth, that this is not the matter of like tens of kilometers, but more like hundreds of kilometers? Or you do not want to get into the details of this?
Yeah,
I would understand.
I'd like to pivot to the F-16 stuff that we want to talk about.
Okay, so let's move to F-16s. We got the info that the training program, at least part of it, is over. What does it mean, and do you expect the Ukrainian crews to board F-16s anytime soon?
Yeah, so this actually I find quite interesting, right? I think a lot of the news media out there, especially the print media, has been playing a little bit of games trying to tie F-16s and capabilities and completions of training to Ukrainian pilots. And I've broken it down a little bit, right? I think if you look at the Air Force Technology article that was out today, it said that the Ukrainians finished some F-16 training. Well, they finished the initial cadre training. And if you look at the picture, and it's presumed that it's a Ukrainian pilot walking with a British instructor pilot. They're walking towards what looks to be like a T1 tutor. So this would be what we call lead-in fighter training or initial pilot training. There's 10 pilots that are staying back that are going to go through physio and medical, and there's tons of things that go along with it. There's survival training, water survival, land survival, resistance. There's tons of training that goes into a pilot program, right? And if we start thinking about, and what I want to caution people, right, is what the UK and NATO are trying to build, and with respect to F-16 training, is something that is scalable and can grow, right? They're not going to take all these first initial cadre F-16 trained pilots once they graduate, because they're going to the F-16 now, and send them to Ukraine. That would be stupid, because then they're going to have to start from scratch again. What you'd want to do is you'd want to send some, perhaps, to start standing up the F-16s in Ukraine, but you're going to hold back other pilots, especially some of the more senior ones, and basically make them become Ukrainian instructors who speak the same language, all these types of things, right? And you're going to start expanding and growing that schoolhouse so that it's a scalable issue, right? So you can grow to where you want to get.
So you want to build a knowledge and a system of knowledge and teaching rather than teaching a couple of pilots to fly a
build it all and then get rid of it and then start over and build it all again. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, Jeff, I don't want to ask any more questions because I don't want you to go to jail, and I do want to have you on our program because we got tons of questions regarding what is going on in Ukraine. So thanks a lot for your time. Great to see you again, and hope we're gonna have a chance to talk again soon about everything that is going on the front lines of this war against our civilization. Thanks a lot.
Sounds great, Rock. Take care, buddy.
Ciao. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your presence. You can log and leave us your email at rackracon.com. Here's our website. Do not forget to click the subscribe button. Yeah, that's rackracon.com. Click subscribe on Telewizja Republika YouTube channel. Most of our coverage is in Polish. However, every day we are going to provide you some English content, and new things are going to show up here as we are following the information about the war against the West. See you soon. We are coming back on Monday. Ciao.